Hi there, my lovely friends. Today is an author reading. It's one of my books, a standalone from my Arranged Marriage series. And this one is a marriage of convenience. For those of you who don't know, my stories are all stories. So if this is not your thing, I look forward to seeing you on Monday for one of my writing tutorials. In the meantime, let's start with chapter 1. Are you still dead set against getting married, son? The Crown Prince of Sijan, known as Avalon to his few friends, glanced up and gave his father an indulgent grin. My answer hasn't changed from when you asked me last month or the month before that. The king of Sijan's grin mirrored his own, as he shook his head. There are some that say a married man is a settled man, one who shows responsibility and maturity. At 35, I think the maturity can be assumed, and I don't have the time for settling when you have me running between the World Council, Marancourt, Westland, and Huit every 5 minutes. I like my life as it is, Father. In fact, the only thing I'd change about my life at this moment is if I could find a way to stop my loving parent from repeatedly asking me a question he already knows the answer to. Avalon popped the last of his mushrooms into his mouth and pushed his breakfast plate to one side. Was there anything else you wanted to discuss with me before I head off to the next set of tasks you've lined up for me to do on your behalf? The appointments you are clearly capable of doing, if only you could get over your slightly strange addiction to soothing your bones in the castle spa every evening. I've done 3 out-of-state trips already in the past 6 months, the king chuckled. I like my home comforts, and it's good for our people to see you acting as our representative with other royal houses across the world. But then his face turned serious. There is something else, and as I hesitate to broach the topic, I ask that you hear me out before making a decision. Avalon eyed his father over the table. You brought up marriage again. If you've lined up another young lady... No, this is different. I admit there were quite a few years when I'd hoped you'd marry and give me grandchildren. However, after that business with the lovely Louisa... The king trailed off as Avalon winced. I don't feel we need to rehash ancient history, Father, Avalon said, pushing his chair back from the table. If there's nothing else... He got up to leave. Stay, Avalon. The king didn't have to snap or yell. As father and son, they were closer than most, and Avalon truly respected the man who raised him. I'd asked you to hear me out. Kindly do me this courtesy. Nodding, Avalon relaxed back in his chair, his gut still churning at the memory of Louisa. Even after all these years, is it just a gut reaction? A habit born of the years I felt this way? You are aware there were some issues with Queen Fiona's family over in Lowenthorpe recently. Avalon frowned, trying to remember what he'd heard. His father had been a friend to the king and queen for decades, and since her husband had died, leaving her on the throne, his father acted as a friendly advisor to Queen Fiona on more than one occasion. There was an abduction, was that right? Not Luigi or Felicity, her older children, but the younger one. Am I recalling that correctly? I've never met the youngest of her 3, but they got the man back, didn't they? I take it he's unharmed? It was Prince Jasper, And yes, they got him back. Fiona was beside herself during the 3 weeks he was missing. Avalon's father sighed and tapped the table with the end of his fingernails. The boy, or should I say man, apparently he's 24, by the time he was found, he'd suffered some life-changing injuries, not least the loss of one of his eyes. Ouch, Avalon winced in sympathy. I can't imagine that was a pleasant experience. Have the healers been able to do anything to assist with Jasper's recovery? They can't fix something that isn't there. The king grimaced, picking up his cup and draining the last of the sweet tea he liked to start his mornings with. The thing is, Fiona has asked me for help. Well, of course, anything she might need. Avalon's hand dropped automatically to where his sword would be, but he'd left it in his room. I can travel there immediately with as many troops as you can spare if that's what the Queen is asking. I've assumed you've offered this young man protection. Or is it that the abductors are still at large? Does she require our help to track down the people responsible? The perpetrators of this horrific crime are still at large. The efforts of the World Council to find them are hampered by Jasper's physical injuries and the fact he refuses to speak about the matter at all. Frowning, Avalon eyed his father closely. It's understandable he might be reluctant to speak of his ordeal. He's been through something traumatic, most definitely. But surely he'd feel a lot safer once the people responsible for his injuries are languishing in the World Council dungeons. You would think that, as would I. But it would appear Jasper is... Well, the way Fiona mentioned it, it's almost as if Jasper was protecting those people in some way, whoever they may be, and that is understandably a grave concern. His return was unusual enough. He wasn't rescued as you might expect. How do you mean? Was he returned in the dead of night or something? Something to that effect, yes. While every guard and able-bodied person was scouring the countryside looking for him, Jasper just appeared in a bloodied mess in the middle of the castle courtyard just before 10 bells about a month ago. His clothes were torn to shreds, his hands were clutching where his eye used to be. There was so much blood in that moment the guards who found him and raised the alarm truly believed Jasper was breathing his last. From all accounts, Jasper appears happy to be back with his family, but he refuses to discuss what he's been through. That is very strange. Avalon hadn't heard anything like that before. One would almost think there was magic involved or some form of cultish behavior given the way he'd returned with no visible transport or clue to where he'd been or who had held him. But there hasn't been a cult like that since the Crystal Peoples were taken into custody by the World Council and confined north of Marincourt at least a decade ago. Leaning back in his chair, Avalon scratched up the back of his neck. There are some clannish peoples living in the hills inland of Lowenthorpe. Does Queen Fiona want me to go and search the area, see if we can find any clues? Perhaps if Jasper could accompany us, along with a suitable chaperone, of course, he might recognize something or someone from where he was abducted. I did mention that suggestion to Fiona, but from what she isn't saying, if you catch my drift, I believe she's concerned that there could be individuals from one of the society families that could have ties to what has happened, possibly even someone in the castle. Jasper acts as if he's in fear most of the time. Anyone sees or speaks to him, and that behavior is new, according to what she said to me. Recent news hasn't helped, the king sighed as he continued. Since that wretched business with the princess in Gunkamal, when King Caspian married your friend Crown Prince Nicholas, and then when King Minton's husband stole them while they were still on Rosenhip territory, not to mention what happened with Prince Xander's new husband while they were still in Bentley, Fiona is terrified Jasper will get abducted again. It sounds like it's just as well Jasper isn't under a marriage contract, Avalon chuckled, although recent history would suggest that would be one way of bringing the perpetrators out of the woodwork. I had a feeling you'd see things the way I did. Avalon's eyes narrowed, and he tilted his head to one side. His father was up to something. Is Jasper under a marriage contract? Not yet. However, the king reached around behind himself, pulling a sheaf of papers off a small side table. He could be. He placed the pages on the main table. Father, no. Avalon leaned back from the table as if the paper smelled bad. Father, you promised after what happened, you said you wouldn't do this. And I'm not breaking my word now. Listen. His father reached over the table with his hand, and after a long moment, Avalon took it. This could work for both you and Jasper, can't you see? No, I can't see. Avalon didn't get stubborn very often, especially with his father. But there were some boundaries he would not let even his father break. Getting married isn't compulsory unless the World Council have made law changes while I was away. It's not compulsory, no. But you have to admit, people talk when people get to a certain age and they aren't attached to someone, even on paper. If what I do for this country already isn't enough, then I don't know what else I can do. Avalon stopped himself just in time. His father should never and would never be the target for the vomit of anger in his gut, the anger that seemed to erupt every time he thought about what he was missing as a single man. Inhaling slowly, Avalon let out his breath and said more calmly, Please explain. After what you promised me, you gave me your vow you'd never change your mind or go against your word. Tell me why this stack of papers, he poked at them angrily, how could this work to mine and Jasper's benefit? I've never even met the man. I haven't got a clue what he even looks like. What he looks like is hardly going to be an issue, is it? At least his father had let go of his hand so he could pour more tea. This would purely be a marriage of convenience, a contract that could be advantageous to you both. Jasper would get the protection of your position and resources, something his dear mother is desperate for. If he refuses to divulge what happened during his abduction, he's not likely to ever be considered for a marriage contract by anyone of similar or higher rank than himself. Avalon picked up his fork, tracing random patterns on his napkin where it had been discarded on the table. There is always going to be a suspicion that something untoward happened to him, leading to all manner of speculation about him. That is already happening. The king tapped the papers. These were drafted in haste last night after Fiona contacted me via Dragon Courier. Her letter was filled with tears and concerns over what she could do. 4 separate marriage contracts have been received since it was known Prince Jasper had returned. None of them are from respectable people Fiona would ever consider in normal circumstances. They were all aiming to secure a connection to her throne and resources through Jasper provided certain conditions were met. Indeed, one of the contracts mentioned bluntly that they would give the reject somewhere to hide his disfigurement in exchange for regular payments of gold. By the goddess of wind and steel, Avalon jumped to his feet. Who dares present themselves in such a way to a victim's mother, someone who ranks as queen? Have they no compassion for what this man might have been through? There are always going to be opportunistic beings who are quick to grab hold of any slither of attachment to a royal family. It's the same the world over. You know this, my son. Although the king didn't sound happy either. Yes, but one of those opportunists could be the person responsible for Prince Jasper's abduction in the first place. The man is deeply traumatized. You said Queen Fiona was so worried about him. Disfigured and possibly violated in all manner of ways, no one with any reputation is going to consider a third son as spouse material. How do we know one of the marriage contracts isn't from the person who committed the deed in the first place, knowing that Jasper was too terrified to ever say anything? I don't know how much Jasper may or may not be disfigured through his injuries, the king continued. I have no idea of what horrors he might have gone through during his capture and how that might have impacted him mentally or physically. By all accounts, and yes, I did check, but from what is reported about him, Prince Jasper functions, albeit quietly, and he struggles to hide his nerves. He responds when someone speaks to him, unless they ask him about his time with his captors, in which case he just shuts down and walks away. He dresses soberly, is always tidy. It's not like he's become a maniac or a madman. Queen Fiona wouldn't have approached you at all if he was ill from what he'd been through. Avalon strode over to the wide windows, overlooking the private garden at the back of the castle. It was more his mother's taste than his own, but the manicured lawns and intricately laid out flower beds were what people expected to see in castle grounds. There are plenty of quiet houses he could have lived in relative peace and surrounded by supportive persons. Why does the Queen believe a marriage is the best idea for her son in the first place? She may rule a country, but at heart Fiona is still a mother. She wants Jasper to have a life. He's still young. He's never stepped foot out of Lowenthorpe before. Avalon's father left his chair to stand beside him. First and foremost is her maternal instinct to worry about him, grieving for the horrors she can only imagine because her son won't alleviate her concerns. I'm not saying Jasper is wrong in that regard by not talking. Whatever rendered him in the state he was left in when he was returned is not for idle gossip, nor likely fit conversation for a lady, not even his mother. First and foremost, Avalon shook his head slightly. There is more you're not telling me. Why has she now approached you about me as a valid spouse for her son? Especially when she has to have known I have turned down every other possible marriage partner in the known world over the past 10 years. Fiona trusts you would not hurt her son any more than he already has been. The king was staring out of the window at a point on the distant horizons. She said when Jasper found out about the marriage offers, something she had never intended he would ever hear about because they were so awful and insulting, he said, the king broke off and Avalon could tell his father's upset was genuine. Apparently Jasper told his mother that she should sell him to the highest bidder, that now his worth as a royal was completely stripped from him. He would submit to whosoever's bid was the most among the low-ranking social climbers who thought they could capitalize on his misfortune. My gods, that poor misguided soul. Avalon wasn't heartless. He'd travelled the world over. He was well aware how quickly a person's reputation could be shredded by a night of drunken revelry in the wrong company. The fact that Jasper didn't speak of his time while under the control of others, and yet would willingly submit to someone likely to use him in a crude and humiliating fashion. He speaks like a man already dead. Or as someone who has nothing to live for, his father agreed. Fiona came to me because she knew you never wanted to marry, to raise children or form a family. She doesn't know the exact reasons why you've held that view for so long, and I didn't tell her, he added when Avalon glared at his father. She only knew anything at all because I had to tell her something when she kept hinting about you marrying Felicity 2 years ago. I made it plain at the time you would not settle down and that you preferred your life of travel and working for the good of the country, something that would be unfair to foster on her daughter who longs to rule her own castle. On the plus side, if you agreed to marry Jasper, it would save you and I a lot of paperwork as I continue to refuse requests on your behalf going forward. I suppose it would solve that issue at least. I assume Queen Fiona doesn't expect our marriage to last. Avalon made his way back to the table where the papers were sitting, picking them up and flicking through them. What penalties are required in the event I invoke the piss-off clause? She's merely asking for an allowance for him, substantial enough that Prince Jasper can live comfortably in private for the rest of his days, which is hardly an issue, is it? You or I would have done that for the young man in any way. But by marrying him, he is granted the protection of our family name as well as his own. The penalty was more than fair, and Avalon could see his father's point. And if Prince Jasper finds me intolerable to live with and invokes the clause on his own behalf, I'm hardly going to take an allowance from him, especially when I have no need. You'll find that clause on the bottom of page 4, paragraph 6. The king turned back towards the window again as Avalon found the right place on the stated page. The words did not make sense. Avalon read them again. What in? I know. Avalon's father raised his hands. Apparently Jasper agreed to a marriage contract, any marriage contract, mind, on only one condition. He believed that in light of what he'd been through in the past 6 months, that any person of any rank or designation, should they enter into a contract with him willingly, no matter what they did to him or how he was forced to live, he refused to sign any document that included a piss-off clause designed for his own comfort or safety. The sacrificial fool. The man was clearly bucking to be killed or eternally humiliated. Jasper might just as well have written the words as a separate paragraph scrawled in elegant script. Lying the pages back down on the table for support, Avalon spared a thought for Louisa, his reason for shunning a marriage to anyone at all. It wasn't as easy to recall every inch of her features, thanks to the years that had passed since he'd seen her last, but he would never forget her compassion for others. Compassion she would want me to share with Jasper. Grabbing a pen, Avalon scanned over the contract quickly, initialing the basic paragraphs relating to titles, incomes, benefits on death, and approving Jasper's rank to be increased to match as consort to his own crown prince position. When he got to the paragraphs concerning the infidelity clause, which Jasper had crossed out where they pertained to his spouse, this man has no respect for his self-worth at all. Avalon added the clause and then initialed it, He had no plans to share any intimacy with the troubled man, but he wasn't going to insult any spouse, even one in name only, by refusing to offer something easy for him to give. The piss-off clause was easy to put a line through. If Jasper felt that he could go into a marriage without the standard clause most marriage contracts included, then Avalon could do it too. Worst case scenario, they were totally unsuited to spend time together as Avalon went about his regular duties, in which case Jasper would be happy and safe at the castle with his father. But there was no need for either one of them to look out for reasons to get out of a marriage it would appear neither one of them wanted in the first place. Reading through the final clauses invoking World Council law and all that jargon, Avalon signed with a flourish. I assume it'll be a quiet wedding? Has a date been suggested? If you're happy with only Jasper's immediate family presence there, then the wedding can be held as soon as you arrive in Lowenthorpe, with a reception banquet to be held here within the month afterward. His father was smirking. Of course he was. I suggest you have someone find and dust off the consort coronet, Avalon said, headed for the door. I can hardly turn up to my own wedding empty-handed. I'll be at my ship, getting it ready if you can have it sent down to the docks for me. I'll sail on the tide. If you're wanting to take a gift to your intended, then ensuring you have extra troops might be a good idea too. The older man's eyes twinkled. Who knows? Maybe the security of marriage might loosen the young man's tongue about those who took him. We won't count on it. You and I both know that's not why I'm doing this. Although it wasn't a bad idea. Avalon hadn't had a project of his own for a while, and chasing abusers who dared steal a royal could be invigorating. Congratulations on your impending nuptials, my son. The urge to snort or make an obscene gesture was strong as Avalon opened the door. Instead, because his father was the king, Avalon bowed to show his respect and headed down the hallway. I've never even met the guy. Chapter 2. What do you mean you're getting married? Is there something wrong with my hearing? Did you say marriage? Surely that's impossible. You promised on anything that was holy and everything in between that you'd never consider doing that ever. You're the only confirmed bachelor guaranteed in the known world. Now King Minton's married. Avalon expected the outburst. He looked at his two friends sitting across from him at the stateroom table of his ship. They were a day into their trip to Lowenthorpe. The distance could be covered in 2 days if he employed the engines of his ship, but Avalon was relying on wind power, meaning the trip would take 3 days. The paperwork was already finalized. He was as good as married already. Avalon was effectively traveling to make his vows in front of whoever Queen Fiona thought was important enough to hear them, and then he was taking Jasper with him on a short ship voyage until he could work out if his husband and he could fit their lives together, or if Avalon needed to drop Jasper off in Sejan with his father before continuing on his life. Part of that thinking process meant sharing his plans with his friends. Duncan, Duke of Coventry, the one who'd spoken, and Merlin, Lord of Hawkesbury, might be considered strange bedfellows among society members always seeking to improve their social ranking through their spouses or arranging profitable marriages for their children. But Avalon's two friends had a relationship that was deep and solid and forged in part through keeping Avalon from making an idiot of himself, especially when he had gone through a rather rough patch in his earlier years. Suffice to say, there was a time when Avalon thought that his shit genuinely did not stink, and that the world would bend to his command. After getting thrown off his first ship and having to be saved by Duncan when he realized the water was not going to support his body, and it wasn't like Avalon could swim, he and Duncan had become good friends. When Duncan met Merlin at a function at the World Court and became instantly smitten, it was Avalon who gave Merlin a job so his two friends could be together. "Where are we heading?" Merlin glanced at him sideways. "If marriage is on the agenda, I doubt we're going to Rosenhip. No one there is looking for a husband. Likewise, I can't see your father agreeing to you marrying one of the nobles from Who Did It or Who It. So that only leaves Lowenthorpe, unless you're heading north of Marencore." "We're heading to Lowenthorpe," Avalon agreed, taking a sip of wine. "We have urgent business there, I suppose you could say." "Yes, like getting married," Duncan said. "Sir, Avalon, come on. What are you doing? What on earth could your father have said that would convince you to marry Princess Felicity? It's not that I've got anything against the woman, surely you understand that. But she's all about home and hearth and wanting a castle she can control. I thought you were happy in your life the way you are." "I am, and that won't change." Avalon nodded as he took another drink. He genuinely did enjoy his travelling, both what he did for Sijan and his father, and the places he explored simply because he wanted to. He didn't long for a home like so many of his royal or society friends was necessary to build a good life in. He liked the idea of being out and meeting new people, going to new places, doing all sorts of things that he enjoyed, and meeting the rush of new circumstances and new situations. Every day in his life was different, and that was something Avalon really appreciated. "Okay, so you can't be marrying Princess Felicity," Merlin huffed. "And you can't be marrying Prince Luigi because he's already married. By all accounts, he's working hard to secure his own heir and spares." "No, it's not Luigi." Avalon barely held his grimace. He and the Lowenthorpe Crown Prince were not friends. "There's a third child, a younger son. He's not someone I recall meeting before, and I doubt you have either?" Duncan and Merlin looked at each other, then Duncan shook his head. "I say younger. He's apparently 24, 25, something like that, I'm not sure." "I find it strange you're marrying a man," Merlin said. "I don't understand why you're doing this when there are so many other matches you could have made with people you did know, and yet you refused every single one of them." Avalon looked at his friends. They knew him better than anybody else, including his reasons for staying single. He shrugged. "To be honest, I'm not sure either. Father was very persuasive, but that wasn't it. There was nothing that he said that would have changed my mind as a rule. But there was something about Jasper's situation." Avalon quickly filled in his friends on what his father had told him about Jasper, his abduction, his return, and the apparent lack that Jasper seemed to have for self-preservation since he'd been returned. "I can see why you'd want to protect him," Duncan said, reaching over and taking Merlin's hand, something he only ever did when he was reminded that life wasn't always pleasant. "I mean, nobody deserves to go through something like that, and for Jasper to speak in that way about his own person is deeply troubling. But doesn't it concern you that he carries physical evidence of what he's been through, and that he still won't speak of what happened, even to assist in the World Council, putting the people who did it behind bars? Leaning back in his chair, Avalon said, "We don't go to Lowenthorpe that often, but when we have gone in the past, and I'm not disputing or disregarding the close friendship that our king has with Queen Fiona, but didn't something always strike you as strange about that place?" "To find strange," Duncan chuckled and Merlin joined in. Avalon didn't have a clue what they thought was so funny, which Merlin must have realised. "You were always spending time with Luigi, Felicity, or the Queen. I think the only time we ever actually socialised there was for Prince Luigi's wedding, wasn't it?" Avalon nodded. "I think so. Most of the time we were just dropping things off or picking things up for father." "The society families are a weird bunch," Duncan said bluntly. "Honestly, I wouldn't trust any of them under my roof. I swear some of them look like they'll stab you in the back while handing you a drink." "There's always been a bit of a weird vibe about the place, but I mean, you could say that about half a dozen of the places that we go to." Avalon could tell Merlin was trying to be diplomatic. Every country has variations on the customs and social niceties they abide by. In the castle, the staff are always hospitable enough. Nobody appears to be mistreated or anything else like that. As a country, it's run as well as any other place might be, although they rely more on magic, or appear to, than many other countries. Their trade bill from Minton of Marencore must be huge every year. I was always surprised that Queen Fiona didn't offer Princess Felicity to King Minton when she was looking to secure a decent match for her. Duncan chuckled, brushing a quick kiss over Merlin's fingers. Avalon smiled to see their easy affection. "I believe she did," he chuckled, "but at the time King Minton wasn't in a marrying mood. The fact that he got married to Prince Sirius was a shock to everybody, including King Minton by all accounts, but they're extremely happy." "It must be the season for it," Merlin said dryly, "because nobody anticipated you agreeing to get married either. Not that it's a bad thing," he added quickly. "But I still don't understand why you felt the need to tuck Prince Jasper under your wing. Have you thought about what you're planning to do with him after the wedding? Are we just returning him to Sejan for your father to look after? Or will he be traveling with us? How do you see this playing out, especially considering you'd never planned on marrying before the past few days?" "He will be traveling with us, at least unless he's completely against the idea." Avalon was determined, now he'd committed to being married, to try and show Jasper he had options when it came to where he lived and what he could do. He needs to learn to feel secure with people again, and I anticipate that will take time. "Well, from what you've said, he didn't want to get married any more than you did, and one can only assume he's doing it to either protect his mother, make things easier for his sister to find a royal match, or maybe his abductors are keeping a close eye on him, in which case his marriage will be a means of escape for him," Merlin pointed out. "If he's looking for a protector, then he's marrying the right person," Duncan said, raising his glass in Avalon's direction. "That explains why we're carrying extra troops this trip. Chasing down people with no respect for a royal youth will make a welcome change from delivering your father's wishes up and down the coastlines." "It could be something different." Avalon raised his glass in return. "With any luck, Prince Jasper will provide us with something to do for the next month that will result in my making our apologies and attending the World Court Ball being held in 2 weeks. What do you say? Are you going to mind if we miss the event of a season?" "I'm sure we'll live with the disappointment, Your Highness," Merlin said, as Duncan and Avalon both chuckled in their glasses. Chapter 3. You don't have to go through this. Prince Jasper glanced sideways at his sister, Princess Felicity. Their blonde, wavy hair was the only family trait they shared. Felicity was bright, vibrant, her skin glowing, and her emerald eyes sparkling. Most people would take her words as showing concern for her younger brother, but Jasper knew better. The paperwork has been signed, he said quietly. You wouldn't want me to go against our mother and queen, would you? He smoothed over his black tunic that showed just a hint of the white shirt underneath. Felicity had offered creams to obscure the dark circles he had under his eye sockets, although only one would be hidden by the patch Jasper refused to be seen without. It's going to take a lot more than creams to fix what's wrong with me. Jasper's stomach was a mass of writhing snakes just thinking about his upcoming wedding. He knew why he had to do what he was going to do. Being away from the castle was the only way his mother would be safe. But the thought of leaving all he knew, his safe space, his things. You haven't even asked who you're going to marry. Felicity was already dressed for the tiny ceremony. Her hair was pinned up under her tiara, and her dress fitted and flared where it needed to. The gemstones encrusted along the hem and cuffs alone probably took a week for a team of seamstresses to craft. Surely you need to know that before the ceremony. What if it's someone gross? Then my husband and I will be well suited, Jasper said gently, registering the verbal win as Felicity's cheeks reddened. Yes, I do know what you think of my eye patch. It doesn't matter who I marry. Our mother, who is also our queen, believes this contract is the best thing for me, and as her youngest son, it is my duty to follow her wishes. It's not like it's going to make any difference who my husband will be. Getting me out of the castle will ensure I don't impede your own chances of making a good match, don't you think? I have very fixed ideas on who I will share my life with. Felicity picked up Jasper's hairbrush, flicking over the bristles before putting it back. I mean, just imagine being tied to someone in life who didn't share your values or recognize the important things in life. Thank goodness Mother has employed some common sense in that situation with regards to my marriage potential. I at least will be making a solid match that reflects my position and lineage, and you can guarantee I won't be marrying anyone I haven't met or spoken with. What I am facing is no different to the situation faced by many in our position. Jasper swallowed hard. He wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. Many marriages are conducted between higher level families where the couples are complete strangers when they stand before the officiant. Maybe, but there are always extensive negotiations that go on before the wedding day. Felicity shook her head. I would never do that without insisting on the groom being present as well. The only exception I can see is if I could emulate Princess Cinnamon of Rosenhip and get carried off by a dragon rider. Jasper quickly looked out the window so Felicity wouldn't see the look on his face. I didn't see you as someone who would agree to spending your first month of married life in a dragon's den. Wouldn't you find it a little uncomfortable? Why on earth would I do that? Felicity's curls went flying again. Honestly, you have the strangest notions. As if any woman of virtue and breeding would spend a month in a cave. There was no use arguing. Jasper knew that from a lifetime of experience. Even when he was right, and Jasper did know about the mating habits of dragons and dragon riders, it was better for him to keep his mouth closed. I didn't realize Mother was expecting foreign visitors, he said, pointing out the window. Isn't that Prince Avalon's ship from Sijan pulling into the docks? Jasper had never met the man, but he knew his mother was close to the Crown Prince and the King of Sijan, and he recognized the flag the ship was flying from the center mast. Where? Let me see. Felicity pushed past him, even though there was more than enough room for them both to stand at the window and see out. He probably doesn't know what's going on today. Oh, poor Prince Avalon. He'll be expecting a royal greeting and refreshments, and Mother's not available. I mean, it's not like Mother would have advertised your wedding day to anybody important. I should go. She hovered, clearly torn between seeing what monster Jasper would end up marrying and wanting to see if her long-term crush was on his ship. Mother would probably appreciate you entertaining her royal visitors while she sees me off safely with my new spouse. Jasper kept his voice low, making the words seem suggestive rather than telling Felicity he really didn't want her at his wedding. I do understand how supportive you wanted to be for me at this time, but he trailed off, unwilling to lie any further. No, you're right. Family is family, but royal duty has to come first. Felicity straightened as if heading off to battle. Jasper could easily imagine she was already planning what pastries and delicacies she would order from the kitchen that would provide the perfect backdrop for her afternoon with people she deemed acceptable company. Chin up. She raised her hands, and Jasper willed himself not to flinch as they landed on his shoulders. Do the family proud, and remember there'll always be room for you here if things don't work out. Thank you. Jasper kept his head down, as if bowing until he heard her leave the room. There'll always be a room for you here for you. It wasn't his sister's place to determine that one way or the other. It was their mother's. Besides, Jasper already knew while danger lurked beyond the castle walls, he would never be back, even if it meant sleeping on the streets. He looked around at the few things he'd collected over the years. Perhaps I should have asked Mother more about who had won the royal husband lottery. Jasper knew all 4 of the men who'd presented marriage contracts for him once it was known he wouldn't speak against those who took him. None of the names augured well for his future. Picking up the small worn leather notebook he kept on his bedside cabinet, Jasper tapped his chest with it. It was his late father's and Jasper's most precious possession. If Sultan Shu has won my hand, then as a concubine I won't be allowed my bag of things. Jasper went to tuck the notebook into his inside jacket pocket and then hesitated. But if I'm married to the Duke of Willowgate, he would probably insist on me being half naked most of the time, which means I could take my bag. So he reached over to the small carry-all he dug out from the bottom of his trunk. But then what if it's Morty or Reginald? Groaning quietly, Jasper sank down, sitting on the edge of his bed, the worn notebook in his hands. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I can do. He didn't dare close his remaining eye. Every time he did, all he could see was the flames and the evil in glaring souls that mocked him. I just have to keep away from Mother until there was no possible end to that until. Jasper knew his life was over. The words he'd been dumped with were etched on his soul. Unless he could find one person strong enough, one person who could. Regardless, it was the reason why marriage to someone, even someone who disgusted him, was Jasper's only option. Your Highness, There was a quick tap at his door, and Frankie, one of the castle footmen, poked his head around it. "The Queen said to inform you the guests have arrived. They're waiting for you in her offices." "Thank you, Frankie." Waiting until Frankie's head had disappeared, Jasper opened the small notebook on a random page. His father's scrawl was large, with words taking up half the page. "While you can breathe, there is hope." "Thank you, Father," Jasper whispered, tucking the notebook into his shirt before smoothing his tunic over it. Grabbing a few toiletries and his hairbrush, Jasper added them to the clothes he'd packed, along with a small amount of cash his mother had given him. Depending on who he'd been contracted to, either his trunk would be put into storage or transport would have been arranged for it. It really didn't matter in the scheme of things. "There is nothing ahead of me I have not dealt with before," he told himself firmly, as after one last look around the room that had been his since he graduated from the nursery, Jasper left for the last time. The wedding ceremony passed in a blur. Jasper still didn't know who he was handing his life to. The official spoke. He answered yes when he was prodded to. The hand holding his was large and seemed to fit the bulk he was standing beside, but Jasper couldn't even look. It was highly likely, if the contract was between himself and someone like Sultan Chew, the man would have been sent a proxy. Jasper focused on the strength of the woman on the other side of him, Queen Fiona, who had gone through so many hardships in her life and yet was still gracious and caring with all who were in her orbit. He remembered the nights after he'd been returned, her sitting by his bedside, tears dripping onto the back of his hand as her healers responded to her urgent pleas to do all they could. It was she who wiped the blood from his skin, who cried over his cuts and bruises, and who'd even taken him to the bathroom when he could barely stand. "I owe my mother everything." It was that knowledge, steeped in his soul, that allowed him to remain upright as he heard the officiant winding up the ceremony. His mother was the only person he had who genuinely cared for him, and Jasper would suffer any indignity, go through any humiliation, submit to anything physically or mentally that was demanded of him if he could keep her safe. "As determined under law, I now declare you husbands together. You may seal the deal with a gentle embrace if you wish, sire." "I wouldn't presume on my new husband in that matter." The voice was rich and warm. "However, there is one more thing I'd like to do while your mother is present." That had Jasper looking up. He didn't recognize the face of the man who'd married him, and he frowned as the man beckoned to another who was dressed similarly in a long coat and boots. A box was handed forward, and the man, Jasper's new husband and not a proxy, it would seem, opened it, revealing a slim and elegant coronet. "My father said we won't be holding an official ceremony back home for a month to allow us to adjust to our lives together," the man said, his hazel eyes twinkling, causing the tiniest furl of hope to start in Jasper's chest. "However, if you'd allow me—" "Is that for me?" Jasper was still trying to work out who he was married to. I should have asked. "We don't have to wear them every day, thank goodness." Jasper noticed his husband was wearing a similar one of his own. He held still. Don't flinch, as the coronet was placed gently on his wavy hair. "There you go." His husband air-kissed one side of his face and then the other, not touching, before backing away and bowing slightly. "I'd ask those present to show their respect to the new Crown Prince Consort of Sijan." Jasper was sure his remaining eye was going to fall out of his head as Queen Fiona chuckled lightly. She genuinely seemed happy for him, especially when the men with his new husband bowed in his direction. "You're Avalon, the Crown Prince of Sijan?" Yes, it was a silly question. Jasper had just married the man. But rather than get angry or show impatience, the Crown Prince just nodded and grinned. "At your service." Oh dear. Jasper's fingers quickly flew to his mouth. "I believe the Royal Princess of Lowenthorpe was preparing an afternoon tea for you and your guests as we speak. Perhaps you should. I wasn't invited, but..." "We'll stay for tea another day," the Crown Prince said. "We have to catch the tide. I've arranged for your trunk to be moved to the ship, so if you have anybody you want to say goodbye to..." "Just the Queen." Jasper moved to his mother's side as his husband huddled with his friends a few yardsticks away. "Mother, what did you do? Is this man here willingly?" he hissed urgently. "Of course he is, my son." Jasper closed his eye as his mother held him close. "You are worth more than you know, and Avalon is lucky to have you." Avalon. "What's more, your new husband can be trusted." The Queen leaned back, resting her head gently and very briefly against his cheek as Jasper opened his eye, an eye his mother met with her own. "If there should come a time when you need protection or a matter dealt with that is beyond your own abilities, know that Avalon will do all he can, everything within his power, as a prince and a man, to bring that matter to resolution for you. Do you understand? I will love you always." All Jasper could do was nod, and as if knowing he was uncomfortable, Avalon came over, saying his own goodbyes and gently shepherding Jasper out of the castle and down to the docks. The hairs on Jasper's neck rose as they left the Count's castle front door and didn't go down until the ship headed out to sea. Well, there we go, my friends. What do you think? Whoops. Am I there or not? No, I'm not. Never mind. We'll pop that back up there. I don't know where I went. Oh, I saw what I'd done wrong. There it is. Sorry about that, my friends. I will get used to doing this because I plan to do some more of them. I would love a way. I'm looking at different ways of promoting my own books this year. And I mean, I do have a channel. I realize it'll probably be more my readers on this watching my videos on a Saturday than it will be my author friends. But, you know, maybe this is something you can put on in the background if you don't find my voice too horrible, and just have it on while you're doing chores, or maybe whatever it is you're doing of your own, maybe some crafting, fall asleep to it. Something like that. But anyway, my friends, I will do another 3 chapters for next Saturday. And until then, please comment, subscribe, like, and do all those things if you feel like it. And in the meantime, I will catch up with you for my long form content on Mondays and Thursdays, which is when we actually talk about writing instead of me just reading my own. Keep writing, my friends. And yeah, have an awesome week. Bye.